Well, hey guys, Montel here, and welcome to another episode of Free Thinking with Montel. I'm your host, Montel Williams, and today we're diving into a powerful and deeply resonant topic: resilience, inspiration, and living with loss. We all face challenges in our life, but how we handle them can define who we become. Our guest today knows all about overcoming adversity and finding ways to stay positive through it all. Please welcome Rebecca Galli, an incredible author and columnist who's faced unimaginable loss and yet continues to inspire others with her words and her wisdom. Becky, thank you so much for being a part of the show today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Look, let's start from the beginning. Can you tell us about some of the pivotal moments in your life that set you on this path of resilience and purpose?
Well, there have been quite a few, but I guess the first would be when I was age 20, and I lost my 17-year-old brother in a water skiing accident.
Oh, my goodness.
So I was brought up in a family of faith. My dad was a minister. My mom was the kind of the old school minister's wife, and it just crushed our family. He was that kid, the one that was going, president of the student body, a musician, active in church and in the community. So that was really, really hard for our family to adjust to, as well as myself.
Mm-hmm.
So, that was, I would say, probably, I've had a lot of tough ones, but the first one, when you're that age and you feel invincible, was probably the toughest because it was the first.
And that set you about a path to trying to understand how to overcome adversity. And then you were set and hit with several others, correct?
That's right. Yes. So my 20s were great. Once I got going in my 20s, I was great. Married the man of my dreams. I got a great job with IBM after college, got a scholarship to college. And then when we were married, our firstborn was great. But my secondborn and my thirdborn both had special needs. My son, Matthew, had a undiagnosed disease of the central nervous system where he had epilepsy. He later died at age 15. And then my second daughter, Madison, had autism, a pretty severe case of that. So after years, that kind of wore on our marriage a little bit, and we became divorced. Still good friends, but divorced. And 9 days after our divorce, I became paralyzed by transverse myelitis, which is
Did you know that you had it at that point in time?
No, it was a quick onset in 6 hours. Basically, I'd had the flu for about a week, and that became a pneumonia. And I woke up in the middle of the night with shooting pains in my legs and some numbness, and then excruciating pain, and I couldn't walk anymore. So that was 27 years ago.
I mean, this right there alone, that's other people would have given up, but you found a way to. Well, first off, did you divorce immediately following that diagnosis?
No, it was the divorce came before I was paralyzed.
Okay, so you were a single mom then at this point in time.
Yes,
you were. Yes, and then that hit you like a brick, I'm sure.
Yes, the kids were 3, 4, 6, and 9, and so that was a lot to manage. But my ex-husband was great with helping me find care and making sure I had good care. And but it was a huge adjustment. All of a sudden, a mom in a wheelchair, and I think the hardest part was that most people that have transverse myelitis have some kind of recovery. A third recover fully, another third partially, and the last third don't recover at all. And so for a long time, I had to manage the hope of I'm going to walk again, and that positivity about I'm going to walk again. And I didn't. And it took me a long time to accept that, which I think is a key thing when you're trying to deal with uncertainty, is when do you...
And at the same time that you're trying to accept that, you're also trying to be a mother.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And
What
parents,
did you draw on? Where did you draw the strength from to continue to persevere?
um, I think that when you're in that kind of situation, you have to examine your resources. What are your resources? And I say, who's in the boat with you? Who can help you get through this? And so I had great family support. I had great caregiving support. My church was supportive. Um, there was there have been a few times I just described to you, times where I'd be pretty angry at God just for what happened. So even though we weren't on speaking terms for quite a while, I did find comfort in my faith. It just took a while for me to kind of settle down and realize that it could be a fuel instead of um, you know a, a place for questions. So
Well, I mean, was there a particular point in time though? I can imagine you get divorced, and then this affliction hits you, and now you've got to call upon your ex-husband, right, to help you with the children and with your navigating this new you. Um, there had to have been a moment in time where you said, "I'm just going to deal with this. I'm just going to make this work." I mean, what was that moment in time, that the aha that said, "I'm not giving up. I'm going to make this happen"?
I don't know if it was a particular moment. There was one with my paralysis when I decided to just give up all the effort I was putting um, toward recovery. And I every day I had tried to wiggle my left big toe because that was the last thing I could wiggle before I totally became paralyzed. And I spent a lot of times trying to make it move, and it wouldn't move. And I realized it was taking up energy in my day and focus in my day, and draining me from other energy that could be spent with my kids, or you know kind of metaphorically speaking, it was a worry. And I've learned that things take up room in your mental space when you think about them too much or focus on them too much. And so I was able to, one day I decided I stopped trying to wiggle my left toe and just accept I'm going to be a paraplegic. I need to accept this. And the minute I did, it was like, okay, shift gears. How can I live fully in this life? And when my son Matthew was diagnosed with seizures, the child psychologist, because I didn't know if he was going to recover from this, they said he could grow out of it, he may not. And she said, Becky, approach it with like parallel paths. On the hope path, you can do everything you want, prepare for him to come home, prepare for a full life, a recovery life. And on the reality life path, you could prepare for him to be, to have to deal with the seizures. And that was very comforting to me, to be active in two different directions, reality and hope.
And
And
so, I mean, now, how old was he when you were diagnosed with transverse myelitis?
he was 6.
Had his seizures begun then?
They began at 3 months of age.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so you're dealing with that, and now you're trapped trying to deal with your own health at the same time, and trying to figure out how to navigate both at the same time.
Yes.
And I'm sure you said you got a lot of support from your church and from friends and from family and from your ex. Um, did his seizures progressed and got worse, I'm assuming, from age 6 to his teen years, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, what kept you focused on trying to be positive? Was it the fact that you had to deal with these things to keep everybody going, or I mean, what was it?
Well, I've thought about this. My first book was called Rethinking Possible. And I realized as I wrote that book how fortunate I was to have a positive background. My family, my dad was a very outgoing, jokester kind of guy. My mom was always positive. His mantra was what's planned is possible. So you're always looking for possibilities. And, my mom was always get your ducks in a row. So it was like, let's stay in action. So I really didn't know any other way. I watched them go through losing their 17-year-old son, and I saw how they coped. They coped in very different ways. My father was very public. He was able to get in the pulpit, a month after my brother died. My mother started a support group, who had other people who had experienced the loss of a child. So in a weird way, I had some background, to help me get through this. And then it just became a way of life. I started writing to explain to my friends what this paralysis was and what life was like. I was a sales and marketing gal, and all of a sudden I'm on wheels and with these kids. And so I really had to rethink what I could do. And so I think, given the background, I really feel like life can be good no matter what. That's kind of like one of my taglines is like, life can be good no matter what. And I've had a lot of what. So,
Mhm.
so, how looking for that good, whether it be the sunrise or, something that is in nature to be inspiring, or just one thing that's a little better today than it was yesterday. Um, that fuels me. That keeps me going, but you have to look for it.
But I mean, but there's a moment in time. I'm trying to go back again in your time and space. You get diagnosed. You fight the battle of trying to recover. Was that for years or was that for months before you realize that I don't think I'm going to recover? So I've got to deal with what I have here. And then you make that decision and then you decide that you're going to be a writer. I'm just trying to tie that together for me.
Sure. So, well, it started really with Matthew when the seizures came. Um, my dad suggested that I journal, to try to get my feelings out. And so journaling became my therapy, part of my therapy. So I journaled through my Matthew, I journaled through Madison, I journaled through our divorce, I journaled through my paralysis. So I had a lot of time collecting my thoughts, because it's like the minute I got them out of my head and onto the paper, they didn't bother me as much. And I could go back and, because you ruminate sometimes, or the same thoughts all over again. It's like, Becky, there it is, let it go. So I had experience journaling. And then when I had a friend from college that I hadn't talked to in a long time, my father was also a columnist, and he wrote about this strange illness that I had. And so my friend Scott emailed me, and this is back in 1997. Emails just getting going, saying, what happened? Is that you? And I'm thinking, I don't know if it's me or not. I'm paralyzed. I got these 4 kids. I'm divorced. So he didn't know any of this. So I caught him up. And in that process, I realized I was kind of writing a narrative of my life. Um, and a friend at church said, your column about playing soccer with your 5-year-old from the wheelchair is really pretty unique. I think we could get that published in the Baltimore Sun. And so I said, sure, here it is, because I started writing emails to Scott, and then Scott would forward them to somebody. And this is way before blogs or any of that kind of stuff. So it was published. That was my first article published. I would guard the garage door. And so Peter would try to shoot, and I'd wheel right and wheel left. And so we just had a blast. Kids don't know. They just adjust so easily. So, but that's kind of how it started. It took me a long time to get that book out, just because life kept happening. But that was
And the title of that book was again?
Rethinking Possible.
Rethinking Possible. And all these books are still available right now on Amazon
Yes.
and places?
Yep, it
Okay.
is. And
So that was your first, Rethinking Possible.
correct.
And I'm assuming that that's what helped you as you dealt with Madison, who had the issues that she has with autism, right?
Absolutely. And actually, it's a pretty cool. I don't know if it's cool or not, but it's a pretty amazing story, and one that I really only realized the impact after I was writing the book. But I was paralyzed in February of 1997, and a couple months later, Madison was in an autism outreach program, and one of her classmates sent home a flyer in her backpack that said, "Come learn how Mason learns." And so I said, wow, this would be great, because Madison really wasn't talking at all, and we couldn't get her to talk. And so we went to this gathering, and it was in the home of Polly and BJ Surhoff. And so, based on who is a famous baseball player, I'm sure you know his,
Mhm.
MVP kind of baseball player. So, but his wife, they both went to Carolina. I went to North Carolina. They went to Carolina. So we knew of each other, but I didn't realize her child had autism. My child had autism, and so she hosted this in her home. And the result of that was, from that flyer, I learned about this therapy that worked with Madison. And it wasn't from a doctor, it wasn't from a teacher, it was from a parent that cared enough to share. So, because of that meeting and the success we had, Polly and I were thinking we need to get parents together to share what other parents have learned. And that became the beginning of Pathfinders for Autism, which is a local nonprofit here in the Baltimore area that serves about 20,000 people a year now, and we're getting ready to celebrate our 25th anniversary next year. So I was able to focus on that instead of my paralysis, and it's like, do something you can do while you're waiting for something you don't know about. So it's like you channel that I'm really a results oriented kind of person. I got to be doing something that feels fulfilling. And that did, so I could focus on the needs of my child while I waited for this question to be answered.
And as you did that and you were focusing on this, that's when you realized that you're probably going to be confined to this wheelchair for life. Has the disease progressed in any ways?
No, I was very fortunate with that. There's occasion that there's some recurrence, but I've been very stable. Um, and that's kind of been my focus. I had thought about some kind of out there therapies, but I had these kids, and I thought stability was the most important thing. I could be healthy and stable and just learn how to live life from the wheelchair, which is
And
what
how many books have you written total?
I have another one that's coming out in October. It's called Morning Fuel, and stretching your mind before starting your day, which is one of my routines I do every morning. I have a little reading that I read, and I do some writing every morning and try to and it's a combination of my writings and some of my father's writings that are inspirational. They either inspire, encourage, or make you think. Which is
And the
what,
book has there's some reflective questions in them. Share a couple of examples of what those questions are.
let's see. Like, I'll tell a story. Like, one of the stories is that my dad's father was a carpenter, and so dad was doing a staircase, and the nails were coming through on the underside, and dad nailed it all, and then my grandfather looked at it and said, son, you need to bend those nails underneath the staircase. And dad said, why do I have to do that? Nobody's going to see them. And he says, I'm going to see them, and I'm going to know that they weren't done right. So and the article is called Bending Nails. And so the questions from that are something like, what do you do when no one's looking? That isn't, but nobody's going to know. And just to kind of probe your mindset about, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. And you've written extensively about positivity and the importance of starting your day off with, a positive mindset. Let's talk a little bit about that, though, because for you, I can understand, waking up every day and in some ways not having a real good look or a good idea of what the day may have in store for you, you have to stay positive so you can deal with anything that comes your way. You know, why do you think that it's best to do that at the top of your day rather than the end of your day? Talk a little bit more about this whole idea of searching for, positivity in the beginning of your day.
I, you know, I, it doesn't have to be, I think you can start your day anytime. You know, there are
Mhm.
days that I was like, okay, I didn't get to my morning readings. Just like, it's lunch, but I still would like to have my readings, and I do it then. I try to be gentle with myself. There have been years where I've been very strict about that, but the older I get, the more I feel like, give yourself grace. Just be a little bit more flexible with it. But I think there's something about the sun coming up that's cheery. I love to watch it. If I really the day's too long today to be out there watching it, but yeah, it's something special about how nature does its thing, no matter what we do.
Yeah, that's really, really, really good to help reinforce for people. I mean, talk a little bit more about some of the tips that you have for our listeners to how they can incorporate this positivity in their morning routines.
Um, well, I like to kind of review where I am, like if I had things that I've accomplished the day before, and I take a note of my mood. Um, there was a time right before COVID, I had sepsis and was in the hospital for 2 weeks. And I was very frustrated with myself because when I came home, I felt like I wasn't making any progress. And what I started doing was as I'm writing my little journal, had a category for how's my body doing? How's my body doing? How's my mood doing? How's my life doing? What are my goals for the day? What have I accomplished for the day or for the day before? And it was amazing to me. I could see the progress, kind of the evidence of the progress in my journal, where it's like, oh, gosh, last week this was bothering me. I couldn't sleep, and now I'm sleeping. And so I think sometimes we have to remind ourselves of progress. We might not get it 100%, but we're making progress in the right direction. And then to see how that affected my mood, because I had noted that. So,
I've noticed in my life, one of the things I focus on a lot is that I try to think at the end of the day before I go to sleep. I think to myself, what did I do today that's worth talking about tomorrow? And then, I used to write them down. Now I just memorize it. But, when you wake up in the morning, if you think about those things that you thought about right before you went to sleep, the positive things that you did the day before, it helps you start your day off with positive accomplishments rather than looking at the day, oh, woe's me.
right. I think that's a great way to start.
And
Absolutely.
and that also turns to the point of being grateful in the morning. I mean, you think about list the things that you're grateful for in your life. That gratitude in the morning helps set your mindset of gratitude throughout the day, right?
And I do that one at night, but you can do it either time. But it's like before I get into bed, it's like three things that you're grateful for. And when I do it in the morning, sometimes, it's that my wheelchair charged, just little things. It gets just started the right way. But absolutely, I love that one.
Yeah, I've been thinking about, I just recently released a video and I'm going to try to do a little bit more about it every week. I'm going to put it up on all the social outlets from Facebook to, you name it, to TikTok and other things. Like I've been talking and thinking about the fact that right now, when I get up in the morning, you cut the news on or you
Mhm.
touch your television on, the first thing that we see are divisive, negative stories. It used to be a day in the news where, people used to talk about if it bleeds, it leads. So when you used to watch the news, you notice how almost all of your news stories would start with the most horrific or graphically violent things that happened the day before. And now, instead of that violence and bloodshed, we go to division. You put on a story at the top of the news, and of course, it's either politics or hate around something. And I think if more people spent more time thinking about more positive things and sharing those positive things, the world would be on a more positive tip. I mean, I can't imagine that. There used to be these things where you look at some of the local news and they used to try to end the news stories with something positive that happened in the neighborhood. That doesn't happen anymore. You don't see these positive stories. So, are there other positive habits that you believe can help transform a person's life through their morning routine?
Let's see. So I would say reach out too, just enjoy nature. But for example, my sister and I talk every morning. She lives in Florida. I'm in Baltimore. But we know to check in. We give each other a little Snapchat. We've got this 1,500 a streak going. Every morning we snap each other just to say what we're up to and good morning. And so I reach out to 5 or 6 people on Snapchat every morning to say good morning. And it's like I like doing that. I look at myself or my beautiful garden and take pictures of that and forward it along. So community is very important, I think, in staying positive. And you can choose who you focus on too. And if somebody is not bringing you up, then perhaps you focus in another way. And then once you're positive, maybe you can help the person that wasn't as positive as they could be. So
And I would bet that just by doing that, it kind of shows gratitude to your friends that you respect their opinion, you respect their input, you appreciate their input, and that's something else that I think a lot of us don't spend as much time doing, and that's just thanking people for being part of my lives.
absolutely. Yes, ma'am. It's gratitude is a great thing to do. It's a wonderful thing to receive. Um, yeah,
And those are the kind of things that I think we need to share more with other people. I mean, tell me some more of the practices that you might recommend to people to help them have a more positive day. Because I mean, clearly you've kind of figured it out, and no matter what your plight has been, positivity is the cornerstone of your life, right?
it is. I mean, I have to admit, it's not every day that I'm positive, but it's a lot of
Mhm.
work to stay that way. That's I think one of the secrets to resilience that nobody tells you is that it takes effort. It really does.
And I got to echo that and say to people, look, I mean, it's crazy. We can spend our whole days, and some people do. That's why they get sucked down in that hole. One of the most positive breakthroughs in psychology was, this whole happiness quotient, happiness theory. You know, we there are certain things in our lives that we have no control over, and when we're born on this planet, we're born. There are certain things that happen around us and to us that we have no control over. But there is so much of us that we do have control over. At any given time, at any given moment in our day, in our life, we can stop, take deep breaths, and think to ourselves about some of the most happiest thoughts that we've had in our past. And we can focus on them. And those happy thoughts and focusing on those happy thoughts, whether we understand it or not, literally have a positive effect on our internal selves. We can spiral ourselves up out of an abyss as quickly as we were able to spiral ourselves down into one. And a lot of people don't believe that, but if you really take time and you stop when every 20, 30 minutes in your day, you can stop and take 3 to 4 really good deep breaths, inhale and exhale. And while you're doing that, think about some of the most beautiful memories of your life. Once you stop doing that, those 3 or 4 breaths, open your eyes and you'll start to realize, damn, I feel a little bit better because I just focused on something that was a really beautiful memory. And that took me away from thinking about the negativity in my life, had me thinking about the positivity of my life. And guess what? I feel better. And if we start to do that routinely throughout our day, we can have a day that's filled with happy thoughts rather than a day that's filled with the negative thoughts that we seem to try to want to chase. And a lot of people don't believe that, but I'm telling you, if you stop for a second and you practice that, you'll realize that, damn, I felt pretty good today.
And I think we have a couple of things. I like the memory reference that you had. I call them polishing your memories.
Yes.
Like bring them out and shine them up and promote them. And
So you know what? Well, you know what, Becky? Why don't we do this? Why don't we do this? Because we got people listening and tuning in right now. Let's all do it at the same time. Let's take the next minute right now. What I want everybody to do who's watching and listening to Becky and I talk, I want you to close your eyes. I want you to, along with me right this second, let's take a really deep breath in, counting breath, count to 3 as you take it in. And I want you to exhale it and count to 5. I want you to inhale again, counting to 3. Count to 3 and inhale. And now I want you to exhale and let it out, counting to 5. Now on this one, I want you to do it one more time as you think, as you breathe in. I want you to think of a really, really, really incredibly positive thought. I mean, right now I'm thinking about when I graduated from the Naval Academy, I threw my hat in the air. I'm exhaling and I'm remembering my 4 children being born. And that can't but put a smile on my face. Now I want you all to open your eyes. And all of you there, including you, Becky, open your eyes. You, whatever your positive thoughts were, that just put a smile on your face. I just saw it. I saw the smile on your face. And if I could see all those that are tuned in right now, I would see smiles on all their faces. How easy was it for us to change that state of being in just 30 seconds? If we take those 30 seconds multiple times a day and do that, your state of being will change at the same time. I don't know. What do you think, Becky?
I think that's a great practice. Absolutely. I did some of the breathing. Can't remember the gentleman. I even during COVID, it was like a 5-minute thing. I would do these breathing exercises, and it was really because I was very strict then. I had my water every day and the breathing, and then I would do my little dancing in my wheelchair to music, all the thing, and then I'd have my caffeine. I mean, that was every day. I had to keep going, and that helped. And the breathing was great. It's a wonderful way to settle the body.
Absolutely. Absolutely. People that I just think we don't spend as much time reflecting on ourselves, reflecting on the fact that we can impact the way we think. I mean, you deal with it, and it's the topic that a lot of people don't like to talk about, but you deal with living with uncertainty, right?
Yes.
And you've had more than your fair share of uncertain moments in your life. And talk to people about how you cope with those and how do you cope with the anticipation of the unknown.
Well, I use the parallel paths that we talked about before, where you've got hope on one side and reality on the other, and try to stay active in both paths so that either way I'm prepared for what happens. The other thing I do sometimes is I use this phrase, even though whatever the problem is, I can still. And so even though I'm paralyzed, I can still write. Even though, whatever the uncertainty is, what can you still do? And focus on that.
I really like that. Even though, say it one more time, I
Even
still,
though
uh-huh,
I can still.
I can still. So many more people need to understand that. I'm telling you, it's crazy. You know, I want to go back to a second to your book, The Morning Fuel. Where can people get it at?
It's coming out in October 29th, and it's available wherever you buy your books.
Okay. All right. Great. Great. And if people wanted to reach you, where would they go? Can they reach you, reach out to you?
Sure, BeckyGalli.com. I've got a website out there, and there's a way to sign up for my newsletter. There's a way to email me. So love to hear from folks.
And is your newsletter a weekly newsletter? What is it? Daily?
It was weekly. It was Thoughtful Thursdays, and I was very vigilant about that until this next book that I was working on. So now it's about once a month, when I have something important to say. So at least once a month. So I'm due to have one next week. So I'll get
Well,
busy.
you said whenever I have something important to say, you have so much important to say because there's so many people out there who, you know, feel as if their life is in such a way that there is no positivity, there's no hope. And, I mean, and I'm not saying this as an aspersion, I'm just saying you have been through so many negative things that have happened in your life, things that people could perceive as negative, and not because of your own responsibility, any fault of your own, but just things that you have been through, and you stay so positive. That in itself is something that I think a lot of people can draw inspiration from for themselves.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It is an ongoing effort, and it's not every day that I'm up. But most of the days I get there. I might not start up, but I try by the end of the day to find some positive things that I've experienced and choose to remember. But
And
go
and
ahead.
one of those is accepting the fact that you can make an impact. You can change the way you feel, right?
Right. You can, as my dad said, you can act your way into a new way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
You just start doing.
Say that again. Say that again.
You can act your way into a new way of thinking.
And that acting your way into a new way of thinking may help you actually practice acceptance, right?
Right. Absolutely. And I think the other thing that I've learned that I didn't like to learn, but that sometimes we have to live life with the questions. We have to learn to live life with the questions. Epilepsy, no cause, no cure. Autism, no cause, no cure. Transverse myelitis, no cause, no cure. Those are big questions. But if I can't answer them, I've just got to live with them, put them at the side, not in the middle where I look through them, but to the side where they're not forgotten. I can't deny them, but they're not controlling how I live.
And sometimes we just have to accept the fact that disappointment is a part of life.
Yeah.
You're not going to win the lottery every day. You're not going to wake up tomorrow morning and somebody's going to write you a check for a couple $1 million and your life's going to change. And that $1 million may not change your life anyway if somebody did write you that check.
Yeah.
So disappointment is part of life. Accepting that disappointment and then realizing that it's not an impediment to the rest of your life is what makes the biggest difference, right?
Yes. And you're a great example of keeping going no matter what. And I really admire that.
I appreciate that because I got to tell you something. I am a firm believer in a very short phrase. Get busy living. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? What what value is it for me to get busy dying? There's nothing. I'm not going to push myself towards that, and so we may as well live with what we have and get busy living. Work as hard as you can to make this life as rewarding as you possibly can for yourself. And you can't do it every second of the day, but you can probably do it every other second of the day.
And I think that's where if the goal is to live fully, no matter what the life, living fully in the life you didn't plan,
Right.
that's a chore. That is a chore, but it's also a joy. It's a constant expectation. What's still possible for you to do?
And what can you learn from the disappointments that you have in your life, right? I mean, you don't look at, disappointment is disappointment. Yeah, okay, that happened. But what can I learn from that, right? I mean, that's how you probably deal with
Absolutely. Again, my
it.
dad used to say, "No experience is wasted. unless you let it be. So
Right.
that's an
Well, yeah,
invitation to learn, right?
absolutely. And reframing the situation into something that becomes a valuable tool. It helps you shift the narrative and from one of defeat to one of opportunity, right? And through that, you have to think in terms of being kind to yourself and to others so that, that kindness helps be your rudder in a way, right?
Yes, absolutely. You know, um, it's ours to give. It doesn't cost us anything to be kind to ourselves
Mhm.
or to others. It's ours to give.
And it's ours to give to ourselves. What a lot of people don't understand is that, compassion, we believe that compassion is something that has to be an outward tool. Compassion also has to be an inward one. You have to actually think of yourself. You can think of the disabilities, you can think of the impediments, and you can do that all day long. But if you think of that disability and that impediment and you think about it, okay, what is positive about that? And what's positive about that is what you've done in your life. Like you've shown people that in spite of the disability, you can still be compassionate enough, love yourself enough to be able to share that love with others.
Thank you. I try. It's an um, ongoing motion forward, hopefully.
Yeah, there's times that gratitude and feelings like that almost feel impossible, but you try to stay positive throughout that. It's about shifting focus to the little things that can bring you joy, even when the bigger picture feels overwhelming, right? So finding gratitude in some small things can be challenging for some, but do you have any exercises or techniques to help people somehow cultivate that as a skill?
Well, the I was just thinking that one of the big pivots you talk about shifting that a lot of times sadness or in uncertainty comes from not understanding why. Why did this happen? Why does this, but instead of focusing on that question, the why, if you pivot to how, you know, how can I live fully in this? How can I grow from this? How can I do the next thing despite this? It gives you a real different vibe. Because,
That's a life. That's living a life with purpose, right?
yes, yes. And that may not be readily apparent. I mean, I didn't know I was a writer, I was a sales and marketing gal, but this seemed to fit, and then it seemed to keep going, and I just pivoted into that. Why not? It works for my life.
And that's sound advice. I mean, what other advice would you give a person who is struggling right now to find their own purpose? You know what I mean? A person who thinks I have no purpose. I can't be a writer. I can't be a speaker. I can't move other people. That word, I can't drives me crazy because you can do anything you really want to do if you put your mind to it. Um, how do you help people start that journey towards fulfilling a fulfilling life and doing positive things rather than just focusing on disappointment and the negative?
Well, I think it's a lot of the things that we've talked about. Gratitude's a big factor in that. I think being planful. What can you do uh, that will make you feel good about yourself or others. I think sometimes when I feel like woe is me, I'm in kind of a pity pool, I will do something for somebody else, something nice, just a card. And it's like reaching outside yourself to connect to someone else. I think gives you a connection and all of a sudden you're not in the pit anymore. You're coming out and you're extending something that you have to offer. And it reminds you that you do have something to offer, whether it's a kindness, whether it's a conversation, whether it's a card or a phone call, you have that you can give. And I think a lot of times we get depleted and think that we don't have much to give, that our life is isolated and so much has been taken from us, but we still have things we can give. We just have to take a good inventory of that and be willing to share it.
Those are just as profound of words as I think most people need to hear and understand. Becky, I can't say thank you enough for sharing your wisdom, your insights. Your story is a testament to the power of resilience and the human spirit. I wish you and your family well. I know that my listeners have enjoyed just hearing you, and they understand that no matter where you are in life, you can always figure out a way to make yourself feel better within yourself, right? I mean, that's really what this is really all about, because by you feeling better and sharing that with others, you've just now made that many more people feel better about themselves.
Well, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to be with you, Montel, really.
Absolutely. A pleasure to be with you too, Becky. I thank you, and keep doing what you're doing. Can't wait for that book to come out. What's it called?
Fuel.
Morning Fuel. When is it coming? When is it coming?
In October.
October. Okay. So people need to keep an eye out for that. And, I'm hoping that all my listeners will go out and get a copy of it. And some of them may reach out to you just to see if they can get a little dose of Becky every now and then. So I want to thank you for what you're doing for so many others. Okay. And if you want to learn more about Becky's worth and get a daily inspiration, be sure to check out her upcoming book, Morning Fuel, like I said, and go ahead and visit her website, BeckyGalli.com. Galli, right? Did I say it right? Galli or Galli?
Galli.
Galli, BeckyGalli.com.
Right.
And I want to thank you all for being a part of the show. Thanking you, Becky. And until next time, stay resilient and keep thinking freely, okay? Thank you so much for tuning in today. Thanks for joining me on Free Thinking with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear your feedback, so please send us your comments.